Welcome to The Explainer. You know, we love digging into really weird, complex topics, and today we've got a real head-scratcher from the Philippines. Imagine this. The government gives you a 10% pay raise, and it ends up being a pay cut. I mean, how is that even possible? Well, we're gonna break it down.
Seriously, think about that for a second. How can adding 10% to someone's salary actually leave them with less money in their pocket? It just doesn't make any sense. But to figure this puzzle out, we have to go back to 2007.
So, back in 2007, the government puts out this thing called Executive Order 611, and the goal was simple: give a 10% salary boost to all its employees, and that included, of course, the nation's judges. You'd think everyone would be celebrating, right? Well, not so fast.
See, the problem was, this brand new order immediately ran head-on into a much older law, a law made specifically for the judiciary. And the clash was so confusing that the court's own budget office had to throw up their hands and basically ask, hey, how are we supposed to make these two laws work together?
All right, to really get what's going on here, you have to understand that a judge's pay wasn't just one lump sum. You can think of it as being split into two totally different buckets of money.
Okay, so in the first bucket, you've got the basic salary. This is pretty standard stuff. It's the government-regulated pay, and here's the really important part. It's subject to income tax. But then you have this other bucket, the Special Allowance for the Judiciary, or SAJ for short. And this was something totally different, with a completely different tax status.
And this SAJ, it wasn't just some random bonus. It was a really strategic move. The whole point of the law that created it was to sweeten the deal, to make being a judge a much more attractive career path, financially speaking. They wanted to get the best and brightest lawyers to join the judiciary.
Now, this entire bizarre paradox, it all comes down to one single, very carefully worded sentence in the law that created this special allowance. It's all buried there in a little section called Section 6.
And the language here, wow, it is so specific. It basically says that any pay raise that comes along has to be paid for by taking money out of the special allowance and moving it into the basic salary. So, you see, it's not new money being added to the pot. It's just shuffling money from one account to another.
So let's walk through this. The government says, hey, everybody gets a 10% raise. So a judge's basic salary number goes up. But at the exact same moment, that same amount of money gets subtracted from their SAJ. Their total compensation, the grand total, hasn't changed by a single cent. It's just been relabeled.
And this seemingly simple administrative step, just moving money from column A to column B, well, it had a huge, and I mean huge, unintended consequence. And this is where the math just goes completely off the rails for the judges.
And the whole problem can be boiled down to just one word: taxes. Because the second that money moves from the SAJ bucket over to the basic salary bucket, its entire status changes. It goes from being an allowance to regular taxable income.
Okay, let's picture this. Before the raise, a judge's total pay is a mix, right? You've got their taxable basic salary, which is a smaller piece of the pie, and then their much larger special allowance, which isn't taxed.
But after this so-called raise, the picture gets flipped on its head. The taxable basic salary chunk gets bigger, and the SAJ chunk shrinks. Now, the total height of the bar is the same, but because a much bigger slice of it is now taxable, a brand new piece gets lopped off the top for income tax. And that's it. That's the pay cut. Their take-home pay literally went down.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This wasn't some theoretical argument. The Supreme Court itself put it in writing, officially acknowledging this completely bizarre outcome. They said, and I'm quoting here, that the net effect was an actual decrease in monthly income for its own justices and judges.
But the problem was even bigger than just a one-time pay cut. The way this law was written, it basically set a time bomb that threatened the entire pay structure for the judiciary for years to come.
Think about it. Every single time there was a government-wide pay raise, more and more money would get siphoned out of the SAJ and moved into the taxable salary bucket. Over time, the SAJ would just disappear. It would be completely drained, totally erasing the financial incentive the law was created for in the first place. The whole point of the original law would be defeated.
So here's the Supreme Court, looking at a law that is actively working against its own purpose. I mean, it's causing pay cuts and slowly dismantling the very program it was supposed to build up. What on earth were they supposed to do?
Well, in the end, the court decided its hands were tied. Even though they could clearly see how absurd the outcome was, the justices determined that the wording in Section 6 was, and this is their phrase, clear and unambiguous. There was just no wiggle room, no other way to interpret it. So they fell back on one of the oldest, most foundational principles in law. Dura lex sed lex. It's Latin, and it means the law may be harsh, but it is the law. They just couldn't ignore the plain text of the law, no matter how illogical the result was. And so, the final order was just as blunt as the law itself. They told their budget office to go ahead, take 10% from the monthly SAJ, and use that same money to pay for the 10% salary increase. And just like that, the pay cut was made official.
But they didn't just leave it at that. While the court knew it couldn't rewrite the law, that's not its job, it could send a very loud and clear message to Congress. It strongly recommended that lawmakers step in and fix what it called a blip in the law. Basically, they were saying, this thing is broken, and you guys need to fix it.
This whole crazy case is just a perfect illustration of that classic tension between the letter of the law, what it literally says, and the spirit of the law, what it was meant to do. And it leaves us with a really important question to think about. When a law, as it's written, ends up creating the exact opposite of what it was designed for, what's supposed to happen next?